We have 5 of the 7 candidates for Harrogate and Knaresborough joining us tonight. So we're going to try and keep it fairly speedy if we can. We've got some questions people have already submitted, and then you guys will have a chance to ask some questions as well. Candidates initially are going to have 2 minutes to each introduce themselves in turn. Then we'll do an hour of questions, and then there'll be time at the end. About 7:45, we'll go to some summaries. So we will start with Andrew Jones, and then just take it in turns. Okay?
Well, good evening, everybody. Good evening, everybody. My name is Andrew Jones. I am the Conservative candidate in this general election. Originally from Ilkley, I have lived in Harrogate for 25 years. Went to school in Bradford and then university in Leeds. And after that, I had a 25-year career in business, always in marketing, starting off at B&Q and finishing off. My last commercial role was here in Starbeck as sales and marketing director at Betty's and Taylor's. I got involved in politics really through becoming a local councillor, which I did in 2003, and then in 2010 the opportunity arose to be the parliamentary candidate, and I put my name forward, really seeking to build upon that work. The reason why I put my name forward was simply I could see how I could get more done for my area at that higher level, and that local focus has been my driving force really throughout the 14 years from that point to this. I sought to get things done for our area, whether it was for individuals or for communities or for the entire constituency. That could take different forms, of course. There's been a bit of a bias towards infrastructure and environment, so things like the new green bus fleet, which is coming in very shortly, also be running out of Starbeck, all the new trains that are on our line, all the increased investment we've seen in our buildings around schools and at our hospital. This election is a mixture of local and national. Our choice here is about choosing a local champion. That's what I've sought to be ever since starting, and if re-elected, that is what I would pledge to be again.
Good evening, thank you very much, and thank you Time Together for organising this fantastic event. My name is Conrad Whitcroft, I'm the Labour candidate, I'm a local councillor, I'm a proud trade unionist, and I'm a qualified project manager. The reason I'm here is quite simple really, I want to see change. I think that since 2010, this country and this constituency have seen an increasingly ludicrous parade of failure, conservative failure in government. And I want to put an end to it. Harrogate and Knaresborough must join the rest of the country again in voting for change. Real change. Now that means having a clear plan and being honest with people. I think that Keir Starmer's Labour Party have the ability to form the next government and do what is right for this country. I actually hope that one day we can change, perhaps even change into a country where politicians don't have to wear suits and ties on days like this. As a candidate, I know the value of public service. Back when the pandemic started, I was working as an intern in a local authority, and overnight, with no training or experience, I went from an intern to a team manager, working to deliver £9 million of COVID grants and look after local businesses and local residents. Now, accessibility is something that is incredibly dear to my heart, and it is not just something I can prove with words, but prove with actions as well. So in York, where I'm a councillor, the previous council administration took the dreadful decision to ban blue badge holders from parking in the city centre. Residents who had lived in York their whole lives were felt excluded from their own city. It's a story that disabled people all across the country, I know, feel too often. So after seeing the protests organised by the local Disability Rights Forum and the organisations surrounding them, I decided to stand for election as a Labour councillor. Not only did we win, but I also took the seat of the administration's transport executive member, the one who had written the blue badge ban. So my administration in York repealed the blue badge ban, and disabled people are welcome in York once more. My actions prove that I'm as good as my word. I want to be clear, I'm not running to be an MP in spite of the fact that I'm a councillor. I'm running to be an MP because of what I've seen as a councillor. I'm absolutely sick of saying that there's no money left because the government doesn't care to properly fund local services. I'm tired of explaining that the planning system is too complex to make transport more accessible, for example. And I'm done. I'm done with telling people on hospital waiting lists that there's nothing we can do because ministers would prefer to accuse disabled people of their fellow human beings of being complicit in a sick note culture. I think it's time for change. It's time to put decency and respect back in government, and it's time to vote Labour. Thank you.
Pass that on, thank you.
Thank you. Apologies for no suit.
Forgive you.
Maybe I'm not a proper politician, and maybe that's what's important. Actually, the reason I'm standing, my name's Paul Haslam, and I believe the microphone is not working. It's not. It is. It's not. Right. Okay. Obviously, that's another black mark against me. So anyway, we'll get on. I'm an independent candidate, and I want to change politics. I am fed up of what's going on in government at the moment. It makes no sense to me. We need a new direction. It's okay, we're all right, we'll carry on. I'm just going to go straight to the thing here, and let's just talk about the really important thing. And that is accessibility. Accessibility runs through everything that I've ever done in politics, to make sure that everybody gets an equal opportunity. I've been chair of scrutiny of transport for the North for the last 5 years. And one of the things that my committee has done is made sure that there's a comprehensive accessibility programme that is free to all the councils across the north of England to access. And it's all about how you make the train stations accessible, you make camp centres accessible, and it's very important that everybody has equal access. And we need to bring people with us, and we need to give everybody a fair opportunity. In terms of what I'm standing for, there are two critical issues that I believe are very much about Harrogate and Knaresborough. And that is that the amount of money the council gets from central government is a third less per head than the equivalent Metro Council. That's a third per head. It's not just a third less, it's a third less per head. So that means you're being shortchanged by 33% roughly. The other thing where you're being shortchanged is our council tax. If we lived in central London, say Westminster, our council tax would probably be 25 or 30% cheaper. So I'm advocating for two things. One is more money to our council to give you better services, because many of you will be supported by those services. And second, that we actually get our council tax to be fair, so that we put more money back into people's pockets. I'm a local councillor for 10 years, and I'm sure more will come out as we talk this evening, and I'm delighted to be here, and I thank you very much for inviting me.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. My name is Sian Oates, and I'm very proud to be the candidate for the Green Party. I got into politics, born in Bristol, got into politics when I was about 8 because I didn't know it there, but that was politics, because I was worried about justice, about the way humans treated other animals and other humans in ways which I was really shocked by. And I went to university in Leicester, started to teach, taught English in secondary schools in Hull and Beverley, and then I moved into the local education authority, where I worked in children's welfare issues and in special educational needs, and then moved to City of York Council, where I did special educational needs work. I was the development officer for the education authority, then also moved into Safer York work with people around domestic abuse and that kind of thing, working as the council's person, working with other organisations such as the NSPCC. Bill and I then went to Uganda, and that gave me quite an eye-opener. it's an eye-opener going. I don't know if you've been to Africa, but it was my first time there, and looking back at Europe and the way things we do here and how things are there makes quite a difference. I mean, yeah, a good friend of ours from Uganda was running for the president of Makerere University Students' Union on a disability ticket. He was a guy who'd had polio at age 3, and of course there was not, he was not treated in such a way that he was made better, so he was in a wheelchair all the time, and of course so many places were inaccessible there. It was very difficult for him, so he's still working on that. After that I came back and did a master's degree in education for sustainability, and then Bill and I have worked completely really on campaigning on these kind of issues, joined the Green Party and I've stood in various elections, including for the European Parliament. I was second on the list for the Yorkshire and Humber European Green Party. And
thank you, Shan. Sorry to interrupt.
Okay, thank you.
That's a long start. Thank you.
Fingers crossed the mic work. Oh, it does. Good evening, my name's Tom Gordon. I am the Liberal Democrat candidate, and a little bit about me. So I'm originally born and raised in Yorkshire near Pontefract. I went up to university where I did my first degree in biochemistry before a master's in public health. The day before I did my master's in public health and I started, my mum drove up to Newcastle, which I knew something was wrong because I'd only seen her a weekend before, and I thought, why is she so adamant in coming to speak to me? And I will never forget that day because she told me that she'd been diagnosed with breast cancer. And at that moment, our world turned upside down. I dropped down and did my degree over 2 years rather than 1 to make sure that I had time to go back home and care for her and my little sister who was 5 at the time. And that sort of experience went on for months. She had to have surgery with, a proper recovery and then chemotherapy. And it was particularly bruising. She's always worked, always played by the rules. Her role had always been one which was largely minimum wage. She was in retail, and her employer said she could have statutory sick pay, and that was it. And for lots of people, including my mum and the family in this instance, that wasn't enough to pay the mortgage, put food on the table, and keep the lights on. Throughout that experience, she would have a chemotherapy on Friday night, so she could be sick over the weekend to be back at work on Monday. And that experience for the family was pretty traumatising. And it was when we got through that, I thought, what on earth has gone wrong? We're routinely told we're meant to be one of the richest countries in the world. We're routinely told and expect that there's a safety net there for when people need it. But the reality is that's been eroded and simply doesn't exist anymore. And it was that experience that motivated me to get involved, to want to make a difference, and to stand for Parliament. It was one of those things that, lots of people have been through it, and when I've been knocking on doors over the last 2 years since I was selected as a candidate, it's something that's come up time and time again, the amount of people who fall through the cracks, who are forgotten about and who are voiceless. My day job is I work in the charity sector doing policy advice for a health charity. Prior to that I used to work for the Carers Trust too, and what I've been doing has been making sure that those people without a voice get their voice heard, and that's what I'd seek to do if elected as an MP. To be that person who is standing up for those who don't have the power, who don't have the ability and access to talk to those who make decisions that affect all of us in our lives.
Thank you, Tom. If I can ask you to keep the microphone. And we'll start with you for the first question. Okay, so I'm just going to read a question that has been submitted to us. So this is from a relative carer of a disabled person who lives in Harrogate. The question to everybody is, are you aware of the current SEND crisis in our area? What specific issues do you think are most pressing? Now we're going to give everybody about 90 seconds. Baz is our time guy, he's going to do the gest of us. There we go, he's going to give you a little wave.
I'll give you a wave for 10 seconds to go. Will that work for everybody?
That's lovely, thanks Baz.
Yeah.
Okay.
Perfect. Yeah, no, so my sister has had an absolute nightmare in terms of getting an HCP. When she then moved from primary school to high school, they said they never received it, and it's one of these issues that does come up time and time again. Obviously locally, a lot of people were disappointed when the special school was bumped back a year for its opening day, We actually had our education spokesperson, the Manila Wilson, who was the MP for Twickenham, who came and visited in October last year, and we met with primary schools and Harrogate College to talk about what issues they're facing, and that was very much a common thread that keeps coming up time and time again. It's one of the things that is featured strongly in our manifesto. If you go online and read that, you'll see it in there that we've talked about making sure that there is funding in place to send. We know at the moment there's a massive issue with getting that funding through from North Yorkshire Council, and in too many cases it just isn't happening. It can take years for people to get through that process, with people having to fight quite often going private to get diagnoses in order to actually get the support they need, and that's wrong. We've said that every child should have the greatest start and greatest opportunity in life, and that's the core of our manifesto.
Hello, yeah. The main thing here, of course, is that local authorities are being starved of cash. Central government is not prioritising welfare of people at all, and local authorities are there to look after their local population. They are cutting jobs all the time, and hence looking for places to save money, and clearly that puts pressure on everything. I mean, I was an officer in a local authority with the responsibility of looking after children with special educational needs, and I know I spent my time arguing the case that if we didn't put in what the children need early on in their school education, it was going to cost the taxpayer a lot more later on. When a lot of children, for example, with dyslexia, the prisons are full of people who have dyslexia, which probably wasn't diagnosed or given the correct support at school. So this is all to do with funding, the ideology that is coming from central government.
Are we swapping?
This one's a little better. Apologies.
I think it's probably user error.
I think it's possibly overheated.
So thank you very much for the question. Undoubtedly, SEND is a big issue. But as I alluded to at the start, we already get a third less money as a local council. And therefore, that's the first thing I'd be wanting to put right, is let's get some more money into the council. One of those, statistics that you can take away, and you can ask this question in Trivial Pursuits, is what ranking does North Yorkshire Council have in terms of education, the budget per pupil? And the answer is we rank 143rd out of about 325 councils. So we're not high up on that level, so we do need more funding, and I will be banging the door for funding. The other issue isn't so much, is more about expertise and the availability of expertise. And because there isn't enough expertise out there at the moment, so there needs to be training and more development in order to look after these people, these group of children with SEND. And that is where we've got sort of a major crisis as well. So it's a combination of things, it's not just one thing. What I will say is I get plenty of emails asking for people to help me arbitrage this, and it is an urgent problem. And not only that, is we need to be helping people from the start in life. So it's very much something that I am keen that we resolve.
Thank you very much. Thank you for that question. I've had first-hand experience of the problems that we have with special educational needs in this country, particularly on the educational front. I think one of the problems, and my fellow candidates have brought up a local issue, even if local government had all of the funding in the world, or what may be considered enough, You can't do it without a joined up national approach. You can't just rely on local government for these things. You need to have a national government that is committed to these issues and having the policies in place to be able to deal with it. So we do have a national approach in the Labour Party, and that's what I hope I can offer in this election, particularly with the plan to bring in 6,500 more teachers and to have mental health specialists in every single school. I know that would have massively helped the young people that I knew growing up in my school, although that wasn't so long ago in the grand scheme of things. We also need to make sure that we have a bit of joined up thinking on this and have a bit of a common sense approach. We can't just be having people with SEND issues going from one institution to another back and forth with no real clarity or thread between it. We need to make sure that the NHS is properly linked in with the schools and that issues are properly brought up and put together. We need to have a national approach to do this, because the issues where this is, you highlighted there 143rd, we're average, right? We're basically towards the middle. If it's bad here, then how bad is it going to be in other places? So let's have a party of government that's able to deliver on these changes. I think that's something we can do.
Well, thank you very much for this question. I think this is a really important issue. In fact, this, I believe, is the most important educational challenge that we have in our area. 10 years ago, there were 1,400 EHCPs across our county. Last year, there were 5,000. That has put enormous pressures on the system, and it was reflected, by the way, in the national figures as well. But let's start with the basic point here. We want, or I want, all children to have the best education possible for them. In some cases, that will be mainstream education, but not all by any means. So we need to see a number of things going on here. We need to see increased budget for our area. The transport budget alone last year went from 5 million to 21 million for the county. That is a huge increase and challenging for them. I've met with the families, I've met with local educational leaders, and I've taken the case for our county down to ministers in Westminster. I particularly made the case about areas that are as large as ours and the impact that has on transport costs. That was taken away and that was being worked upon when the general election was called. So the key here is recognising that families are under intense pressure. I can absolutely guarantee that they will have my support in getting whatever they need, but I also want to make sure that the county council has my support in getting the funding it needs to deliver improvements in the service.
Thank you. Are we working? We're working. So we're going to take a question from the audience. We had a question submitted by Meg, who wants to read their own question. Yeah? Okay, so I'm just going to have this open.
I'm going to read my question, write it down. So as of December 2023, over 172,000 people were waiting for an autism assessment in England. NICE guidance states that no one should wait longer than 13 weeks, but this data from the National Autistic Society shows that of those waiting for an assessment, 86% have been waiting longer than the recommended 13 weeks. I don't know if you're aware, but the current wait time for referral in the Harrogate area for autism or ADHD assessment is a minimum of 3 years. Diagnosis is vital to get the right support, and people in this area are struggling, ending up in crisis and sometimes even dying whilst waiting for much needed support. So my question is, how do you propose to fix this issue of wait times, and what would you do to advocate for those lost in the system? Thanks.
If we can start with Andrew.
Well, thank you very much for the question. I am aware about these deadlines because I have met with the National Autistic Society, who I think do a very good job indeed in lobbying and informing people of the situation. I think the challenges are really very acute. I think they take twofold in terms of solution. That is a mixture of budget and workforce. Paul mentioned the challenges of delivering workforce, so did Conrad, and I completely agree with that point. The growth has outpaced the capacity of the system, so we need to have a workforce plan, which we now have, to bring more people forward. In terms of budget, we're seeing more budget supplied into the NHS, more budget supplied particularly into mental health services, but the challenges are acute. I completely recognise that, and that's why I should be lobbying and have been lobbying for more budget and the workforce plan.
Well, thank you, Meg, for asking that question. It's a really important one to be able to bring up, and thank you for giving us the opportunity to talk about it, because this is about waiting lists. We know that they are absolutely devastating. They have never, ever been this high. And it doesn't matter whether you're going in for autism assessment or a broken arm or gender-affirming care, whatever it may be, we need to make sure that we are dealing with the waiting lists in a compassionate and proper way. So Labour's plan for 40,000 more NHS appointments across the sector, the entire health sector. That is going to be able to be brought together by the abolition of the non-dom status and reform as well. Now, if John were here, normally I'd make a bit of a joke and say we need reform, but not that kind. John's the reform candidate. But it is incredibly important that we change the NHS for the better to make sure that it starts putting patients first. Wes Streeting, who's our shadow health secretary, and I hope will become the health secretary, talks about how we need to make sure that we bring it together and make it fit for the 21st century. We saw during the pandemic the ability to use things like the internet and the NHS app. Feels like we might have not been able to make the best of that. So we need to have the courage to say form first and make sure that patients are put first. But having those 40,000 appointments a week is really, really going to help.
These are frightening numbers, and for me, this should be a cross-party issue. It's not about one party being right and another one being wrong, because our children are vital to our future. So I'm not going to fight this and say they're right, they're wrong. What I would be saying is, and again, but I don't like this top-down view. If we know that it's 3 years here in this area, then we should be making a plan. My background is management consultancy, I do management consultancy all the time. We make a plan, we know if it's 3 years, and we know that the story over here is it needs to be 13 weeks, the question then is how do we get from there to there? What do we require? And then we can start to really go out and budget, whether it happens to be 6,500 additional teachers or however many extra workers. I don't think anybody really knows. They throw these numbers out there. The approach has got to be, this is the problem, how do we fix it, and how do we fix it quick? And we might have to do a different approach. And I know we're not talking about water at the moment, but if we ban sewage discharges, then the water companies would have to think differently. And maybe just putting water butts on every house is a different way of doing it. We need to find a different solution that delivers very quickly and within 13 weeks. That's a lifetime for a young child. Thank you.
Thank you. Again, it comes down to budget. In our manifesto, which is Manifesto for a Fairer, Greener Country, we're saying Green MPs will push for £5 billion to be invested in special needs SEND provision within mainstream schools. This means that all schools will have fully accessible buildings, specially trained teachers, and local councils will have the funds to properly support SEND students at school and in getting to school. Personally, I've been particularly interested in issues around autism. I've organised training at Green Party Conference on autism. We brought in a specialist company to do that. And in York, City of York Council, where I was working Special Needs Development Officer, I invited all the parents of children with autism diagnosis to discuss what would be best from their point of view, which was somewhat controversial at the time, but anyway, I persisted in doing that. And they obviously wanted mainstream provision, but also they did want a special unit, and that was in fact set up in York. So yes, it's a massive issue. It needs money, it needs obviously training, awareness raising, lots of staff, and the agencies working together.
Thank you very much for the question. And I mean, what's been really nice is actually Harmony has broken out, I think probably for one of the first few times in all the hustings that we've had, we're broadly all saying and agreeing with the same things. And I think what we need to do is make sure that there is that support in Parliament and really make sure that it's not an issue that is forgotten about, because that's the issue at the moment, is when we come down to cutting waiting lists, there's always a tendency to talk about prioritising other medical issues, and it needs to be all of them. One of the things that is cutting through across all of this is the staffing issue we've got in the NHS. We know that we haven't been training or retaining enough staff, and that's obviously having a massive impact on the ability to provide appointments for a range of different diagnoses and medical conditions. The Liberal Democrats, in our manifesto, we put health and social care at the core of everything. That is the biggest issue. If we don't have people who are healthy and well and supported in the broadest sense, we don't have a society that functions, and we need to be making sure that everyone has got that opportunity. We've also been talking about trying to make sure that we've got a fairer system. There are often lots of people who still do fall through the cracks, and trying to capture those in different ways. My background before I started working in the charity sector, I was also working as a health economist at the University of York. Part of the problem that we've got is that we've got this short-termism and this thinking of what can we get done in the next 5 years, because that's when Parliament's next due to be re-elected. And the cost that we end up missing out on because we don't think longer term is clear.
Thank you very much. Could we get the mic back to Conrad, please, to start the next question? Thank you. So I've got another question submitted by someone who is in attendance tonight, but they've asked that I read the question out. This is a disabled person living in the Harrogate-Informer area. The question is, what will you be doing to ensure that social care is better funded so that local councils have enough funds to pay for high quality services? Clients don't have to spend large amounts of their income, whether in paid employment or solely benefits, contributing towards their care costs. And carers and support workers are given a decent living wage and incentivised to keep working with social care.
Thank you for asking that question. So as a local councillor, I know how much pressure that local authorities are under in trying to pay for social care. People often make the assumption that social care is paid for by the NHS, and particularly that came around because now we've got the Department of Health and Social Care. Unfortunately, the main change in creating the Department of Health and Social Care meant adding the words "and social care" toward the stationery. There wasn't any real change around what social care is. For me, it's the defining issue of our time, and it's one that no one talks about enough. So I want to talk about integration, making sure that social care and the NHS are properly integrated. We talk about issues where people spend so much time in hospital when they don't need to be there, but there's simply nowhere else for them to go. I think that needs to stop, and that's where we bring in the reform nature of our plan for the NHS to make sure that we get the right care for the people that need it. And getting people into the care homes as and when that they need to be. We also need to make sure that the right workers are there and people who are working there. So this is where we can again bring in Labour's plan around a new deal for working people. And at the centre of this sort of came, I think, out of lockdown. I think a lot of us over lockdown saw that a lot of the people who perhaps society used to value the least are the people that actually we rely on more than anything. And the New Deal is about making sure that those people get the right pay and the right fair representation at work, trade union rights, to make sure that they feel welcomed and ready to stay in the sector. So there's a number of things there, complicated issue, but I hope that Labour can solve it. Thank you.
Yeah, it's interesting. Our first three questions have gone from the start of life to perhaps an older situation. For me, I think the key thing is that we have to have an integrated system that starts when you're born and ends hopefully a lot longer down the line. And I think that we have two challenges here. The first one is, how do we deal with the current problems and how do we find a way out of that? And the other side of it, which I don't hear a lot of talk about, is actually what's the prevention? What's the cause of a lot of these problems? How can we have less people in hospital? What is it that we can do? Do we have to give everybody an MOT from the age of 5 or equivalent? How do we actually deal with that so that we have less people in hospital? A frightening statistic at the moment is that average lifespan is 80, but the average active lifespan is 64. Well, shouldn't we be helping people to have quality of life for the whole of their life? And then this comes back to social care. Yes, it should be better funded. Yes, it should be part of an integrated solution, and ideally the people that work in it need to be better rewarded because they are a fundamental part of that solution and a benefit to people.
Yeah, there's a lot about this in our manifesto, and I'll read some of it out to avoid me waffling. So the Green Party believes that free social care is fundamental to a functioning welfare state. Elected Greens will push for the introduction of free personal care along the lines successfully brought in by the Scottish Government. This ensures dignity in old age and for disabled people, increased pay rates and a career structure for carers to rebuild the care workforce, investment of 20 billion per year. Restore the value of disability benefits with an immediate uplift of 5%, end the unfair targeting of carers and disabled people on benefits. They're often blamed when they should be supported. Oppose plans to replace personal independent payments, the PIP cash payments, with vouchers, and in the long term reform intrusive eligibility tests like PIP. Make it mandatory for councils to provide free transport for 16 to 18-year-old pupils with SEND. Ensure disabled workers have the in-job support they need as well as proper pay and conditions, and champion the right to inclusive welfare support and housing under the principles of universal design.
So the Liberal Democrat Manifesto, as I've said repeatedly, has health and social care at the core of it. And we've said one of the things that we need to do is we need to see a retention and an investment in current care staff. At the moment, we're seeing lots of people off the back of the pandemic who are leaving the sector to go work in other roles, whether it be in supermarkets where they can get paid more than being a carer. We want to see a £2 increase in the minimum wage to try and encourage people to come back to the sector and keep those there who are currently working in it. And we know that's key. We've got a chronic shortage of care workers. I'll tell you why this is an issue that matters really personally to me. So on New Year's Day, not this year, but last year, my granddad passed away. For the last 6 months of his life, he was trapped in a hospital bed blocking, because North Yorkshire County Council, as it was then, couldn't get a care package to get him out of hospital and into home. As a consequence of that, he repeatedly caught pneumonia and COVID, and sadly passed away. I don't blame anyone, but I do think about how the last 6 months of his life could have been a heck of a lot different if he'd been able to get out of the hospital and into his home. It would have made his life a lot more comfortable, and it would have made my grand's life and the family's life a lot more comfortable too. And that's why this is an issue that matters. And why the Liberal Democrats, our leader, you've probably seen on the PPV, the party broadcast, is a carer. And in addition to the social care sector too, we need to do a heck of a lot more for unpaid carers who are massively hidden and support the entire sector.
I hope to see a better time on Saturday.
Well, I think this is a really important question, so thank you very much for asking it. I think that the integration between health and social care, which has taken place nationally and locally, is absolutely necessary and rather overdue. It has not yet worked its way through fully. They are two halves of the same coin, but have operated separately for a very long time in this country. That has led to all sorts of problems, notably, as everybody on the panel agrees, the difficulty in getting people discharged from hospitals. In practical terms, the government pledged to make £8.6 billion available to help councils with discharge, and that's a 2-year settlement, but they're also looking to give them multi-year settlements in future so they can plan much more appropriately for the future. The second part of the question was to do with workforce, and I agree with the comment that Shan made. This is a bit of an undervalued workforce. Frequently, in some areas, on the minimum wage. We need to move away from that. This is complex, challenging work, and it is difficult work. We need to therefore pay more. The national living wage is a start, but we need to go beyond that. The national living wage is now £11.44 per hour, and that has been a big increase. That has actually given people an £1,800 a year increase this year, right now. So I think there are a few areas here. Follow through the integration nationally and locally, give councils long-term budget settlements and more budget, value the workforce with career structure that includes extra money.
Okay, thank you. Could we have a microphone to Paul for the next question, please? So before I read any more that have been submitted, do we have anybody here tonight who's got a question they'd like to ask?
My name is Michael. I'd like to ask all the candidates if they were elected, how they would represent us, their constituents, in Parliament, how effective they think they can be. And secondly, it's a two-part question. The second question is, how do you think they could stay grounded? I mean, grounded.
Could you repeat that? How do you think?
Grounded. How do you think they could stay grounded in the Westminster bubble where we've seen Partygate, dare I say, Gambling Gate? How would you, as an MP, stay grounded, in touch with your constituents?
Michael, thank you for a very tough question, but I'm probably the one who you may be targeting with that question. For me, I've left party politics because party politics rewards loyalty rather than capability and integrity, and I think the country is fed up with that approach. We need people with true integrity to be there. I'm not suggesting anything about these particular people here, by the way. I think they're all very decent people. But the party makes you have to toe the line, and I know Andrew will talk lots about that. So I'm going to leave that alone. What I will say is, how are you effective? Well, I'm effective at North Yorkshire Council. I was a Conservative, I've moved away from that, but I'm still effective. And I will be very effective down at Parliament. I will be a very strong voice for the people of Harrogate. I also, when I go past Watford Gap, I will not forget that I am from Harrogate. At least you've adopted me. I've been here since 2006. And before that, I moved to Leeds in 1993 for 6 months and didn't escape until 2006. And it was only just up the road. So that's one thing. Stay grounded. I'll be hosting, thank you for the sign, I'll be hosting quarterly town hall meetings where anybody can come and speak to me about any topic, not just the regular surgery, but regular town hall meetings. Thank you.
Yeah, good question. Right, effectiveness. I think it's all about working together, and I've always done a lot of multi-agency stuff. And I think I'm a great advocate for the diversity, the importance of diverse voices in anything that you're doing around, well, most things really. You need lots of voices, you need to listen to lots of people and find ways of doing that. And certainly in talking about effectiveness, Caroline Lucas, our one Green MP, who's won pretty much all the awards for good MP-ness, she's managed to work with all the other parties to do an awful lot of stuff. One MP for the Green Party. We're hoping we might get 4 or 5 this time, by the way. So it's about diversity, listening, and yes, as Paul says, obviously you have to have surgeries where you are so that you've got a place where people know they can find you, and be very open and available so people can email you and talk to you easily. That's the really important thing. In terms of grounded, well, with people, it's about keeping talking to people. And I like talking to people. I'm busy out there at the moment, stopping people in the street. It's something not everybody likes to do, but I actually like doing it. I like talking to people on the street. And with nature, I have an allotment and, keep grounded that way too.
Thank you for the question. I think what's really key is that we need to try and change politics, and it needs to be more collaborative and people working together. I know when we had the business hustings a couple of weeks back, I was talking about having a regular meeting with them, and the same would be true of the charity sector and other organisations, education sector too. And I think that's really how you do it. You've got to be in contact with people 24/7, your finger on the pulse, to be able to raise those issues effectively and be a good constituency MP. At least that's what Paul Willis has told me. and people, still hold him in high regard. I think what really is key too, in terms of being grounded, it is, as has been said, that sort of maintaining that contact. I was selected in January last year as a candidate for the Lib Dems, and we've been out 5 nights a week knocking on doors since then, and now 7 days a week, all day, now we're in the general election. We've had thousands of conversations with people, and that's why the campaigns that we've been running, that we've been talking about, like the NHS, like trying to fight to get money to repair the crumbling concrete, like the issue with dentistry, it's why we've chosen those campaigns, because they're the ones that you have told us are important, and they're the ones that local people want to see fixed. And again, I think that's how you stay grounded, by not thinking you're better than anyone, by not getting, tied into, doing all these things in Parliament. It's got to be constituency first every single time. And that to me is sort of what I seek to do.
Well, Michael, thank you very much for your question. I think it is a really important question. How do you build effectiveness? Well, I think the key thing that I've found is through relationships, and that is a mixture of relationships locally and nationally. Locally through service providers or with different community groups. So I have a relationship where I can pick up the phone to a local head teacher, but also they can pick up the phone and say, Andrew, something isn't right here, and we can get stuff done together. So I think at the heart of it is building relationships, trust and local action. How to stay grounded? Well, I think you can see people do become a bit bubbly in Westminster. There is a Westminster life. I think the key actually is to not get involved in any of that. Just get always home again. I am from here. I entered Parliament seeking to be a champion for here, and I've never stood anywhere else. It was always about what I could do for here. And I come home on the weekends. I view my journey south over the last 14 years as business travel. I view my journey north as coming home. And when I get back here, I meet with business groups, surgeries. I've had pop-up surgeries in supermarket foyers, that sort of thing. Just keep grounded, talk to people, and it's only actually by having those relationships that you actually can be in touch with what is happening in your area and get stuff done to make it even better.
Thank you, Michael. I'm going to take a slightly different approach from the rest of my fellow candidates, because I think the role of an MP is to be your national representative and make national decisions for the whole country that will positively affect everyone in the constituency as well. That's one of the main things I'm trying to get over, and I do think, touch wood, fingers crossed, I do hope that Labour will be able to form the next government. You can have a representative on the government benches rather than shouting from the sidelines in opposition. It's also worth noting that a lot of the time, I'm a local councillor and I do regular surgery with my MP. People will come in and talk to the local MP, and then the local MP will say, Conrad, you've got to sort that, that's a local issue. MPs can't really have a large amount of impact on local specific policies. Their job is to try and set the national agenda. Now, I'm not saying I wouldn't hold surgeries. I already hold 2 surgeries a month for my council in York. I would disagree about holding regular town hall events, kind of ones like this, because I think they can often sort of descend into focusing on the politics rather than actually and sort of the discussion. You watch Question Time, and I wouldn't really want to be holding regular things like that. I'd rather have something like one-on-one so people can come and approach me. But it's about setting that national agenda as well. In terms of staying grounded, my friends and my family are very good at keeping me grounded, particularly my mum, who's a Conservative, who always tells me that I'm wrong. But I also believe that it's important for me to work with the local organisations like the local Labour Party, who've been very respectful here for me, and also making sure I stay in touch with everyone. But I want to take a national approach.
Thank you. Have the mic down to Sean, please, for the next question. So before go back to a submitter's question. Are there any more questions in the audience tonight? Lovely. Okay, in that case, I'm going to read a question that's submitted by a relative of a disabled person locally. The question is, what will happen to the School for Autism at Woodfield if a party other than the Conservatives get in? And if we could start with Sean.
Could you just repeat it, please?
Sorry. What will happen to the school for autism at Woodfield, the plans for the Woodfield Primary to be converted to a school for autistic children? What will happen to that school if a party other than Conservatives get in?
Yeah, I would say that it will probably be a lot more successful. I've been very unimpressed with successive governments that we've had. There's been, as I've said before, starvation of cash, and local authorities have been decimated, as have other services. So I'm sure things will go far better if there's a different government in.
So the point that I think the question is trying to get to is, should people be worried or afraid if we have change? And I don't think that should be the case. I think it should be a positive thing. I think you see this from all political parties who, when they're in control and trying to keep control, will tell you, the repeated attacks on Labour about this £2,000 in tax, which I don't think anyone believes, by the way, nor should they. You shouldn't be scared into voting for someone. You shouldn't be fearing the repercussions of exercising your democratic rights. I would like to hope whoever the MP is, out of this lineup or those not here, they would work with the local authority for the needs and benefits of the constituents. That's certainly the way that I would go about it. Obviously, what will be interesting is what happens at the next North Yorkshire Council elections. At the moment, the Conservatives have a narrow majority after getting propped up by some independents. I think that's more likely to have a much bigger impact on the provision of services locally, whether it be the special school or any other services. But I think what is key is that, like I've said previously, whoever the MP is needs to be working and trying pushing those things forward. And there was a lot of disappointment when it was pushed back a year, and we should expect better than that. But again, I think, as has been mentioned repeatedly, a lot of this comes down to funding of local government and making sure that we have an MP who will be banging that drum to get money from the government to fulfil those vital services on the ground is what we need.
Well, I was disappointed when the Woodfield Primary closed, but very heartened at the prospect of a new school which will cater for 80 pupils. I think this is about local government rather than about national government, and I think that this is going to happen. I think it is secure. I don't believe whoever wins the election is going to make a difference, because I think this project is going to happen. In terms of timing, let's go through where they are. The council has advertised for an academy sponsor to come in to be the partner in running the school. They're looking at an April 25 opening date. The point I made to them was I want to see that site retained for educational provision. It's a fantastic site, right in the centre of much high density housing, but it's got a lot of green space around it, which is really necessary. So it's a cracking site, and we need it open as soon as possible. We're looking at an April 25 start date, and I think it's secure, and we should be looking forward to it.
Thank you. Broader I understand what the rest of my fellow candidates are saying about Woodfield being a very local issue. Very pleased to see that it will be able to be open, and I'm really positive about the opportunity this will have for children who need that very specialist form of care. I don't think we should be worried about change. I think this question does get to the root of what's going to happen if something changes. So a broad agreement with Tom there, I think, in terms of don't be scared into voting for someone or voting against someone. We also need to think about local government, but the way that local government is changing. So this is the first election that we've got now with just the North Yorkshire Council, and also with our combined authority, which is run by Labour Mayor David Scaife, who I've worked very closely with. I worked on his campaign. I continue to be professionally close there, and I think that it's important that if we are going to be able to have a proper strategy, we need both national government and local government and our new regional government. We're going to be finding our feet a little bit, I think, in terms of having a mayor and York and North Yorkshire working together, but I think we can do that really positively, and when that comes to applying for grants or for funding. One final thing I do want to say as well, because it is a school that will, under Labour's policy, have a mental health specialist there as well specifically, and often people can overlap neurodivergence and mental health. They do overlap and interconnect in some very complicated and interesting ways. but it's not to say that they are identical things, so it's important to make sure that everyone gets the mental health support they need.
Thank you. Just a quick clarification. I am not an independent propping up the Conservatives at North Yorkshire Council. I just wanted to make it absolutely clear, because you didn't. So, there. Now, I happen to be the councillor for Bilton and Nid Gorge. I fought tooth and nail to keep this school open, including becoming a governor, chair of governors. I chased everybody, including Andrew, and Andrew was very supportive. And so I'd be very angry if this school does not reopen, because it's definitely needed. The school at the time had over 50% SEND pupils there, so it was already doing this job. Okay, it was a primary school, but now it needs, now it's going to be a secondary school, and that's great. But I don't believe that any change, whoever becomes MP, will impact on this. It is a local council issue, and I will stay a councillor as well as an MP until this school gets resolved if there's an issue, because I will not tolerate this school not reopening as a school. It will be a dreadful waste. It was a fantastic facility, and it can be a fantastic facility again for that community. Thank you.
Can we start the next question with Tom?
Yeah, I'll come to you, Tom. It's all right.
Treating you so well.
So I have another question submitted. This is from a professional working supporting disabled people. And the question is, what are you going to do to support Harrogate and Knaresborough charities and voluntary organisations?
So I think one of the things that MPs have access to through the parliamentary internet is a tool called Grant Finder. Those who get the emails from HADCA probably receive a weekly email update with all the funding opportunities. And what we need is someone who's going to go further than that and give them even more opportunities and highlight to them and connect the dots with local organisations about money and grants that might be available. So that would absolutely be something that would be on the top of the list. I think, you know, as I mentioned earlier, my role is in the charitable sector, so I'm coming from a background where I understand the financial pressures that the charity and voluntary sector have. You know, in electing me, should I be fortunate enough, you've got someone who gets it. You know, after the pandemic, we've seen massive issues with funding of voluntary and charity organisations. And again, that partly stems from cuts to local government funding and the inability to them to be able to take on and provide services. What more, like I said earlier as well, is we seek to meet with community and charity organisations regularly as well, keeping the finger on the pulse of those issues. And where there are examples of outstanding performance or best practice, you know, I'd be an MP who'd want to champion that in Parliament and talk about those issues and make sure they get their credit where it's due and see how other people might be able to learn from the best that I know we've got here. So that, broadly speaking, is what I seek to do.
Well, I think the voluntary sector adds astonishing quality of life in our area, and we are blessed with the range and diversity that they have. They need nurturing. I've certainly made Grant Finder available and also picked up the phone when I've heard that opportunities exist, just simply to say, here's a chance, and then written in support. If they make a bid, I'm with you all the way, how can we get this over the line? But it isn't just about funding, it's also about volunteers and highlighting that many local groups need more volunteers. To highlight the range of voluntary activities that are available, I ran volunteer weeks. I did several of these where I volunteered for an entire week's time in different organisations, highlighting different parts of the geography of our constituency. Some of them will be in environmental issues or in care or in sport or in arts, just simply saying that whatever you are interested in, there is an opportunity if you have a chance to give something back. So I think it is about funding and about volunteers and promoting both.
Thank you. Well, I'd like to thank the amazing work that the voluntary sector and charities do all across this constituency and all across the country. But the more that I see the things that I see continue to happen is that they are doing more and more and more and less and less and less, with less and less and less, because they are having to deal with the gaps that have emerged within our social safety net, within the problems that we've got as a society that the state simply isn't going to be able to pick up. We see larger and larger amounts of voluntary and charity workers having to do more and more. Take the amount of food banks. There were negligible amounts in 2010. Now there are thousands. This is continuing to be a problem, and it proves that there is an erosion of the social safety net that we need to be able to deal with. Of course, I value the amazing expertise of charity workers, particularly charities such as the Royal British Legion, who have done better work engaging with veterans than any state body could ever probably do. But you need to make sure that the funding and the organisation is there so that we don't end up relying just on charities to fill with the social safety net. I sometimes do hear this argument, I'm afraid, that charities should be there as an alternative to a strong state. But Clement Attlee always said that if a wealthy man wants to do his best to look after the poorest in society, he should pay his taxes and pay them gladly rather than just doling out money on a whim. I think that's the best way to go, so I think we need to have work, of course, closely with the charity sector, but don't give them too much to do.
Thank you. I'm rather curious because both main parties have said they're not going to raise tax, and so I'm not quite sure where they're going to get money from. But, we are going to raise tax. Okay. However, I don't think they're going to raise a lot of tax. At least that's what they've said, and the perception is that at the moment there's not going to be very much change. And I get that to a certain extent because you need to understand what that case is if we change governments. However, I think this is a much more complex issue that we need to deal with straight away. We can't be waiting on things. So the charity and voluntary sector is very important, but there are certain things that I think they need support on. So first of all, I try and be a consummate networker. So I'll be networking wherever I can and wherever I see opportunities for a charity or a voluntary sector, I will take it and I will pass it on. And if it's more than a name that needs to be done, then I will do that. So I think that's important. I think there's an issue around shared expertise because we have several, say, charities that perhaps do the same thing but perhaps don't share the expertise. So how do we share that expertise? How do we get joined up thinking? How do we get more volunteers? All things that Andrew has talked about. I think they're important. But I think one of the most important things in terms of financing is if there might not be more money on the table right now, but can it be guaranteed for a longer time? I hear the problem is 1 year settlements aren't enough for charities to be able to do the great work that they do. Thank you.
Yeah, I'd agree with Conrad about taxes. We should not be relying on the voluntary sector to do what the statutory sector should be doing. But there will always be gaps, and I think that the voluntary sector is so important and also gives people the opportunity to use their passions, their skills, their experience in a positive way for themselves and for their community. Bill and I went recently to a funder finder meeting in York because obviously finding funding for the various charities that we're involved in trying to help, you need to have those kind of things, and that's the sort of thing the local authority can help with and an MP can help with to support those kind of events and networks which help voluntary organisations to have the resources and find the people that they need and to do the networking that they need to do, because as Paul says, networking is very, very important with all of this. So comes back to taxes, government commitment to putting that money into the statutory services, but we must support the voluntary sector as much as we can. Thank you.
Do we have any more questions from the audience tonight? Okay. Are you all right to speak about the mic?
Thank you all, a really interesting evening so far. So much I want to say, but I'll need Baz if if I start, so I won't. My question is, I am, so far in my life, a lifelong Labour voter. I think we're all aware that the margins between the Lib Dem seat and the incumbent are growing ever closer. Conrad, sorry to use you, but as a lifelong Labour supporter, why shouldn't I vote for Tom in order to affect change locally?
So to be fair, we will put questions to everybody,
Okay.
if that's okay.
Can we say that to the end? Is that okay then? Put the questions up. Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Oh yeah, sorry, Conrad. So absolutely everybody.
Andrew has them like this.
And I'm not quite sure how to answer it either.
No. This is what I'm here, right?
So, well, I just make two comments really. Firstly, we're choosing a local champion. This feels very much like an election in, or the phrase I've used is in two acts, nationally and locally. Nationally, the opinion polls haven't moved for a while, and quite frankly, it looks very likely that we will be having a Labour government. Conrad will be pleased with that. I'm not so pleased, but that's not where we're going. I think that pivots the question then into who will be a good, effective local champion for our area, and I would suggest that with a track record of delivery, I have been exactly that. In terms of everything else, I would just simply say people should just vote with their principles, because this hasn't been a period of high principles in our politics. If you look back at the 2019 general election, who were the main players? Boris Johnson, Jeremy Corbyn, Nicola Sturgeon and Joe Swinson. Well, Boris's long demise is documented. Corbyn out on anti-Semitism, Swinson arrested. Quite frankly, this is a pretty low point, so I think that's quite a... Sturgeon arrested, you're absolutely right. Yeah. Sturgeon arrested, got it the wrong way round there.
I was like, what's she done?
Joe Swinson has not been arrested. I can absolutely confirm that. But I think the point remains about a low point in politics, and principles are important, and I think people should stick with them.
Breaking news about Joe Swinson. I've got no news. Yeah, really appreciate your question. Had it a lot when we did our canvassing on Saturday as well. A lot of people asking me, telling me that I'm a paper candidate. Right, I've been told I'm a paper candidate so many times I can actually hear myself rustle. I thought I'd get that in for the last Hustings. And the seat was originally designated as a non-priority seat for the Labour Party. That is true. But then, last month, something spectacular happened. It didn't just happen here. It happened in Northampton, it happened in Scarborough, it happened in Whitby, it happened in York, it happened in Selby, and it happened in Ainsty. The Harrogate-born David Scape won the mayoralty of York and North Yorkshire for the Labour Party. So I'm not going to let anyone tell me that Labour cannot win here. We are winning in places that Labour has never won before. And I don't think that either of the two candidates, some of whom seem to be vying for my votes in quite an interesting way, I don't think that anyone should be able to tell you that you should have to put your box here even if you'd rather not. You should vote for the candidate and the party that you want to represent you. I think that I am that candidate not just for the Labour Party but for the constituency and as a national government of change. I think that change is in order, and I think that it's the Labour Party that can be the best representatives here.
As an independent, I would be saying you need to vote with your principles, because that's why I'm an independent. At the moment, or at the dissolution of the last government, or parliament, there were 24 independents, and all had been booted out of their parties. So not a good sign. And it was roughly 50-50 split. So I would be saying to you, you vote for your local champion. Whatever happens nationally is a consequence of what we need locally. What we need locally is a local champion, somebody that looks after our affairs here. And that's what I've promised to do. I'm a fighter. I have done several things, including leading the challenge against the relief road that North Yorkshire Council wanted to do. I fought on the, I fought for the school at Woodfield. It took a working day each week for nearly 2 years, and still we didn't get the result, but I still fought day after day to try and get that result. So you need to vote for who you, in your heart, feels right, not a tactical vote, because at the end of the day, you get what you, if you decide to vote Lib Dem or whatever it is you decide to do with your tactical vote, and then you don't like the consequences, you've compromised. I would not compromise. So vote with your heart.
Good question. And people are really struggling with this, aren't they? We're all stuck in a terrible trap of first past the post, this medieval voting system which we're left with in this country, because the Conservatives and actually Labour are not interested in changing it. We need proportional representation. But to get there, we're going to have to work smart, because if we have the Conservatives or Labour in government, they don't seem to have any interest in changing this stupid system. So now I think we have to work tactically to get people in who want proportional representation. I'm actually focusing my energies at the moment on Wetherby and Easingwold and not on Harrogate and Knaresborough, because there we are targeting our resources. It's a new constituency, and we have a candidate who's been there 40 years, who got 69% of the vote in the North Yorkshire elections, has a very good chance of actually being elected. So here, I think you have to vote tactically to get in a party that wants proportional representation.
I think I agree with quite a lot. I mean, I'd start by just saying, it's a very personal question in a way, isn't it? It almost feels like we're trying to say that one of us is better than the others. And I genuinely believe, hand on heart, everyone here is in it for the right reasons. Everyone's been really fantastic throughout the campaign and very supportive of each other. I sort of would echo what Shana's just said there in terms of this is an election where people, and the Liberal Democrats included, have said we want to get rid of the Conservatives. In places like Harrogate and Knaresborough, where we won the local elections locally, where we won 8 out of the 12 councillors at the time, where we've seen successes in other seats which are blue wall, where we could beat the Conservatives, where we previously held the seat or sometimes never held the seat, where the challengers, out of all the candidates here, I think I'm the one who's been in place and working to win this seat for the longest. You will have had endless pieces of paper and door knocks over the last year and a half, 2 years, and I know it gets very tiring, but there is a reason and rationale to it, because we have a good chance of winning the seat back, and that's what the polls show. And I know everyone always goes, oh, the only poll that matters is the one that's on polling day, and that's absolutely true, but we've seen in pretty much every MRP of these multi-level regression polls throughout this campaign that it is a toss-up between myself and the Conservatives. And what I would say to you, just on the tactical vote and PR side of things, is that I would love this to be the last election where people have to tactically vote, because people should be able to go out and vote with their heart. But the reality is at the moment, you've got to vote with your head. And I would like to think that over the last 18 months, through leading campaigns on trying to make sure we get the money to repair rack at the hospital, whether it be campaigning for more NHS dentistry, whether it be talking about the issues that we want to see dealt with when it comes to sewage and reform of the water companies, whether it be through all that work that we've demonstrated that's why we think we can win, and that's why people should lend us their support. And I would just say is, we always try to say that, or I certainly do, is it's not a case of you have to vote for us. You don't. That's absolutely not the case. But we would appreciate you lending your support so that we can get rid of the government that's been in place and seen some of the worst sort of policies implemented, whether it be Rwanda, whether it be not giving free school meals to children, and actually, sorry, I'm rambling now. I'll shut up.
You can keep the microphone for now. Thank you everybody for your fantastic questions and for sitting through the temperatures and the technical difficulties. We're going to finish how we started, but in reverse. So each candidate in this way will have 2 minutes. Thank you to Tim, who's been filming it for us, and Baz, who's kept us perfectly on time. So 2 minutes to summarise.
I think I've pretty much said what I was going to summarise in my closing speech anyway. This is an election that, when it comes down to it, will be between us and the Conservatives. And I think we've made that positive case. We've not just relied on, pointing out the failures, but the positive alternative too. I've sort of outlined why I got involved in politics and why I want to make a difference, and shared some personal stories too throughout that. And I think that's what we should ask, like, why are people in this? What motivates them? What are the things that they want to see change? And for me, it's about our NHS and our social care system. That is what got me into politics. That is one of the biggest issues that we face, both locally and nationally. And it is something that I've already been working hard to try and fix. Like I say, we've been raising the issues of the crumbling concrete in Parliament. Our leader raised it at PMQs, a health spokesperson met with me and then also raised it with the Secretary of State. And I think unless we have a system that puts people's health and well-being first, then we're not in a society that we deserve. We should demand so much better than what we've currently got. We need to give people that opportunity to go out there and thrive, no matter what their start in life. We need a system that is fairer, that doesn't limit people, but lifts them up. And at the moment, we've fallen so short of that. So come, in a week and a day's time, that's the situation and the choice we'll be faced with here. Out of all those polls, and I accept, as has been said, Labour look like they're going to be in government. Even when they're winning 500 seats, they're not winning here on the MRPs. So it's one of those situations. It's that's the stark reality, and I do hope that people, choose and vote for change.
There are lots of maxims I could use. The price of freedom is eternal vigilance. That could be a Green Party motto. Things won't improve if you just shut your eyes and ears and hope for the best, whatever that is in your book. Regulation, or red tape as it's called by those who don't want to be bothered by it, is crucial in a world where there are so many of us humans busy with our machines, technology, buildings, vehicles, chemicals, and selected and modified animals. We're all jostling for rights and space and fairness. Without regulation, we're seeing grotesque inequality. This is resulting in disease and early deaths of people and destruction of nature. The hostile environment invented by the Conservatives to try to keep migrants away is like a snarling dog which has got out of control and has now turned its attention on everyone. People who are disabled or homeless, out of work, have mental health problems, need support, people who are young, old, work in the public sector, drive trains, you name it. If there's something wrong, it's not the government to blame, but anyone else, anyone at all, except the very rich, of course.
Thank you. It's interesting to summarise, particularly when you're independent. I support proportional representation, but the Greens are leaning that way. I believe that you should all be making a vote of your own heart and conscience for where you want things to be, what you want for your town, for Harrogate and Knaresborough. It's vitally important. I live here, I've lived here an awful long time, a lot longer than perhaps some of the other people around these tables. I have only ever represented my area of Bilton because I needed to make a change. I came into politics because I didn't like what I saw, and I could either shut up or put up, and I did. I put up and I became a councillor, and I've continued to do that. And even at the moment, I continue to fight as a councillor for my residents, and I would be doing that if I were your MP. What I would say is, I think this race is open. I don't think people have done the numbers right in this town. I already know that my voting and the voting for Conrad is much higher than the Lib Dems and the Conservatives would have you believe. So I think there is merit in voting for who your heart tells you to. And just finally, one thing I would say is, and as I'm presuming you've all heard of Albert Einstein. Albert Einstein said, to continually do things the same way and to expect a different result is insanity. So you need to vote for change, whatever change you feel is appropriate that serves you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me here today to speak at this Hustings. This, I think, is the last Hustings of the campaign. I'm really going to miss them because I absolutely love to be able to try and get my message across as much as I can. Now, I may be that rarest of breeds in this election, a Labour underdog, but I wouldn't have it any other way. People have underestimated me many, many times before. They've underestimated me because of my age, because of where I'm from. In fact, yeah, it is true, I'm 24, but I'll be 25 on Friday. So hopefully that's old enough for you and you've got the chance to give me the best birthday present ever. I think we've all agreed that we need change. But the question is, what are we going to change to? If the MRP polls are correct, I don't think that they are, but if they are, if we get that Labour government in, and we've been told time and time again, the only poll that matters on election day, that is still true. There is still everything to play for. We desperately need a Labour government in this country to make the changes that are going to provide things like the homes that we need for young people, in terms of building those, a new publicly owned energy company, more teachers in our schools, more NHS appointments. That is what I am standing on as your candidate. I'm afraid if you elect an opposition member of parliament, someone who won't be able to make the case to what I hope is a Labour government, you are simply going to get an MP that can do nothing more than shout from the sidelines. If you vote for me, I'll be on the pitch and I'll be scoring goals. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for organising this event, and can I just thank everybody for coming, because I think we have discussed issues. You have raised issues which aren't always widely discussed in our political system, but they should be, because they really matter. I think the key for me was actually about how we have seen a consensus break out amongst all the candidates, how we are all agreed that the importance of access, the importance of SEND, the importance of care is fundamental to making our community even stronger. I was going to highlight a little bit, we didn't get the question on access, I was going to hopefully raise a couple of points. I took the opportunity as a transport minister to change the rules on access in our country. I wrote the Bus Services Act, and that made it mandatory for buses to have audiovisual displays. I made it illegal for a taxi to charge more for a passenger in a wheelchair, and I brought in the biggest change in our rolling stock since we went from steam to diesel, eliminating some of the most grotty old rolling stock, which was not disability compliant. So I hope that that is an indicator of how much work I have done on this issue. Now, we're going to see, this is a strange election, and quite frankly it seems to have been going on for quite a long time. I'm not sure that people are that engaged in it, because I think we've had so much over the last few years with COVID, with the war in Ukraine. It's felt like it's been a long, hard slog, and I think it's because it has. But I think we have come through that, and our choice now is about who will be the local champion to take the next stage forward. I have delivered for our area new schools, 2 new operating theatres, green buses, all the other things we've been talking about during the course of the evening. It's about choosing a local champion. That's what I have delivered, and that's what I will pledge to do again.
Lovely. Thank you very much to the 5 candidates who have taken the time and made the effort to come and speak with us all today. Thanks to Tim, we're going to have a video copy available soon, so people that couldn't make it tonight will be able to see what's been said. Feel free, everyone, to stay if there are any conversations you want to continue. Equally, if you want to go home and drink something very cold, please do. Thank you very much for coming.